The people leading the Vermont Bioenergy Initiative are forging the connection between diversified agriculture and renewable energy production. These farmers, scientists, and entrepreneurs are at the forefront of a local production for local use movement, and they are proving that local food systems and clean energy production together are economical, compatible, and essential. These are their stories.
My name is Mark Mordasky, and we are here on Rainbow Valley Farm in Orwell, Vermont. The farm has been around since 1987 when my father moved here from Connecticut with a dairy, and it was a dairy until 2005. I joined my father in the business in 2007, and since then we've attempted to make a go at agriculture in the Champlain Valley with an operation that does not include dairy. The oilseed idea came about out of necessity, looking at fuel prices at $5 a gallon, and what else can we do with this crop? And the answer sort of fell in our laps. The Sustainable Jobs Fund was really the knowledge base and support that we needed to take the first step into that biodiesel arena. As soon as the ground is dry in the springtime, we'll hitch up our land finisher behind our big tractor, and we'll go out and we'll start to do the prep till for the spring seeding. What this basically does is it disturbs the top 4 to 6 inches of soil, gets aerated and broken down. Once again, Addison County clay, you have to expect that stuff sticks together. A lot of times we'll go through and there'll be chunks of clay the size of basketballs in it. Those chunks need to be busted down into smaller pieces, and the land finisher, it's a vertical tillage tool. It leads off with a roller harrow, and intermediately it has hooks for deeper digging, and then it follows up with rakes to smooth out the land.
Soybeans are a legume, and therefore they produce their own nitrogen in association with the bacteria in the soil. And therefore, soybeans do not require the application of additional nitrogen to have a high yield. Soybeans are relatively easy to grow. They have fairly low nutrient requirements. They fit well into the climate in Vermont. There's flexibility in the planting date. In order to determine the nutrient requirements and demands of any crop, the first step is to take a soil test. It's a relatively easy procedure to go about, and the best way to do that is to contact your university extension system. Soybeans perform best on heavier to medium textured soils. Soybeans do not always perform well under very light, well-drained soils.
Once the soil is prepped for planting, we have a tandem-towed 21-foot grain drill. We load the seeder with what's called a seed jet. It's basically a gigantic vacuum cleaner. It draws the seed off of a very large bulk seed box and blows it with air through a long tube, through a wand that we can point in whichever direction we need to load the seeder.
Soybean varieties are purchased based on what's called maturity grouping, and there's 13 maturity groupings for soybeans. In the Northeast, generally farmers will grow maturity groupings 000 up to 2.5 maturity grouping. Probably the number one agronomic practice to remember is to select a variety that fits within the growing season of Vermont to make sure that they'll mature before killing frost. Soybeans are planted from early part of May, sometimes into the end of June. They require very warm soil temperatures to germinate and do best when planted at a soil temperature of 60 degrees Fahrenheit or above. Soybeans are planted between 1 and 2 inches in depth, depending on the soil moisture. The seeding rate for soybeans depends on the row spacing. When soybeans are seeded in 30-inch rows, they're planted at a population between 150 and 185,000 seeds to the acre. When soybeans are planted in 6.5 to 15-inch rows, up to 15-inch rows, they should be seeded at lower seeding rates at 125,000 seeds per acre or less.
We get the seed put in the seeder. It's about 3,200 pounds of seed by the time we're done. And that's enough seed to cover roughly 50 acres. And we start to plant. The seeder will move at a rough speed of 5 miles an hour, which gives us approximately 10 acres per hour of total planting. The tractor that runs the seeder is GPS guided. I can sit in the tractor and allow the GPS to steer the tractor by itself. I don't have to touch the steering wheel at all, and I can pay attention to what the seeder's doing. The key to planting and getting a very good crop is that you need to do it as early as possible. That's why we want to go in there and get that done in the second week in May. However, those soybeans still will produce a crop that will make ends meet if they're planted as late as July 1st.
Crop rotation is an important aspect of growing crops. Soybeans can be grown in a monoculture more so than other oilseed crops. They are susceptible to some disease and insect pests. They perform best when rotated with other non-broadleaf crops, which would include corn, small grains, or forage grasses. Soybean yields can be very high in Vermont. Soybean yields in Vermont can match those of the Midwest and can match those of Iowa. So it can be a highly productive crop, again, with the proper variety being used and soil types and practices. We at the University of Vermont Extension, through our variety trials, have seen yields of 30 bushels and upwards in the 85 bushel range as well per acre.
When it comes to harvest time, we will take a walk out in the field. We'll start picking sample plants. Typically what we're looking for is all the leaves of the soybean plant have to have fallen off. The plant needs to be dry and crisp. If you shake it, the seeds have to rattle inside the pods. The pods themselves need to split open very easily, just with minimal pressure with your fingers. They should split open and the seed should fall right out. So we'll just take a seed and simply bite it in our mouth. We've, through experience, become accustomed to how the seed breaks apart under pressure of our teeth to judge what the moisture level is. The combine picks up, threshes, screens, sorts, and divides the crop between the tailings and the seed itself, and separates the two and gives us a clean seed product to put in the bin in one process. And it does so in real time. As we're driving through the field, it picks up the crop and it does it quickly and efficiently. After 4 years of operating a combine, I've become experienced enough so that I notice things that I wouldn't have noticed 2 years ago. And in noticing them, I can catch problems before they happen and mitigate the damages that they cause. You can get a doctorate degree in combining and not learn it all. As you're in the field combining grain, the guy that's driving the grain cart will drive up alongside the combine, and without stopping, we can unload the contents of the grain storage bin on the combine into the grain tender that's being drawn by the grain cart operator. Once he's full in the field, we'll leave the field and draw the grain back to the farm and put it in the grain bin. The grain bin is what we use to bulk store the grain for long periods of time in a stable, safe environment. With the steel grain bin, we can place grain in it for as long as we want, sometimes a year at a time. The grain bin has drying equipment in it that we can use to aerate the crop and dry the crop. Say, for instance, the crop comes off the field a little bit too wet. We can use that equipment in the grain bin to dry it down to a stable moisture level. If the grain is in the bin throughout the winter and is cold, in a big thermal cold mass, and it warms up outside, you'll find that moisture will infiltrate the bin and cause a certain amount of spoilage in the bin. With this aeration equipment on the bin, we can use that to maintain moisture at a constant level and keep spoilage from occurring. So what we'll do is we'll take the crop up to the biofuel processing facility that we've made, and we'll press the seed using a mechanical press. Once we process the soybeans into the oil and meal, the meal is either sold as feedstock or organic fertilizer, and that's a done deal. We don't have to mess with that at all. As it comes off the press, it's a marketable product. Or in the case of the oil, we have to process that further into biodiesel.